another 45 minutes, and then we'll get started.
Get started right now, actually.
Well, in the interest of time, I'll start. My name is Bernie Rudnick. I'm moderating the panel. I'm a founding member of Mid-Atlantic BioAngels. And I'm going to ask the panel individually to introduce themselves, and then we're going to talk about how you access our groups and how we process various investment possibilities. Why don't we start down at the far end?
Okay.
With Bill.
Mike.
Michael.
Mike. Okay.
Hi everyone. I'm Mike Garland from Pfizer. I have two roles at Pfizer. I'm on our venture capital team, and I'm also a scout in our oncology research unit, looking for opportunities from academic collaboration all the way to clinical stage collaborations or licensing acquisitions.
I'm Bill Kohlbrenner. My background is, I think, giving me a pretty detailed view of the early stage therapeutics investment space from several different perspectives. The first is big pharma. I spent most of my career at Abbott, now AbbVie. And after many years doing research, I moved to business development, where I led a global scouting team. And an important part of that role was supporting AbbVie Ventures through identifying and evaluating opportunities for potential strategic investments. And as you know, strategic investors frequently have different goals, objectives, timelines than other investor classes, but there's some common concepts. The second perspective comes from 4 years as CSO of Life Science Nation. Beyond sponsoring this conference, we actually offer consulting tools and other services, including iBank services, for entrepreneurs that provide an in-depth view of what's needed for obtaining successful investments. And being at this interface between investors and entrepreneurs, it's been very interesting seeing the dynamics of that whole space. And finally, I'm also, as of a year ago, I'm also a fundraising CEO. I had a small Chicago-based startup called Neurolucent, which is a company working on Alzheimer's disease. We're working on a small molecule target that's not beta amyloid or not tau. We believe, and we have evidence, that it's upstream of those two markers. And this has provided an eye-opening perspective on the challenges in obtaining investment funding for high-risk, high-return opportunities.
Hi, is this on? I think you're going to hear me, guys. I'm George Petrokoulos. I'm a partner at Camden Partners that started as the private equity side of T. Rowe Price, so we're Baltimore-based, where I co-founded our venture capital group with a sole focus in biotech, so drugs, devices, and diagnostics. In the current fund we have, we focus mostly on technologies coming out of Johns Hopkins Medicine, or people that went there and are now all over the country. But we're launching another fund within a month or two that will be more global. But for the past couple of years, the focus has been Hopkins or Hopkins-related companies. And we started that group in 2015, and we have been expanding very rapidly. So we'd love to talk to any of you that have companies in the space.
Thank you, Adrian.
My name is Adrienne Sachs. Good afternoon. I'm honored to be part of this panel. I am an entrepreneur in residence with Fortress Biotech. For those of you that are not familiar with Fortress, we are one of the companies that is actually a company starter, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about the different types of investors out there this afternoon. We are really a biotech accelerator, And our business model is to in-license early stage technologies and as well as later stage, but early stage technologies, invest behind them, but not only with funding, but we also have functional expertise to move those opportunities from early stage preclinical development into early clinical development. And we are somewhat therapeutic agnostic, but I would have to say that we focus on specialist-led diseases. In addition to my responsibilities as an entrepreneur in residence, I also am on the executive committee of a biotech accelerator for women-led life science startups, which is Springboard. I don't know if some of you have ever worked with Springboard, but Springboard is a unique opportunity for women-led startups, predominantly early stage. And in addition to identifying funding, we work with women CEOs to help them to build whatever capabilities they need to run a company and actually acquire the functional resources, financial resources that they need to advance their companies. And in addition, I also advise many university accelerators in early stage, on early stage opportunities that are thinking of commercializing.
Great. My name is Bernie Rudnick. I'm one of the founders of Mid-Atlantic BioAngels. I'm also the founder of Mid-Atlantic Diamond Ventures in the Buck School of Business. I'm a limited partner in 4 venture funds, actually, and a pool, and on the investment committee of 3. I am an aggressive technology and therapeutic investor, primarily therapeutics, with 71 private investments. So having said that, let's talk individually about how we look at deals, how we screen deals, the process we put companies through. And I think it's important for everybody here to understand where there's a match, how they might be able to reach us and be able to submit their proposals. Why don't we start with Adrian?
Okay. I think that when you're thinking about submitting an opportunity to a particular investor, what I like to make sure of first thing when I look at a proposal is, and I think I'll speak for all of us, is there an unmet medical need and what is your solution? You think it's basic, but I think it's important, particularly with early stage opportunities. What is the unmet medical need? How is your technology or therapeutic opportunity address that need? And also, it's very important that in addition to perhaps some validated science that may be out there published by others, at least for Fortress, we like a lead candidate established, and we also like to see that you have generated your own data. So those are some of the kind of preliminary requirements that we like to see. I would also say that we'd like a very organized package that actually goes through your story that we can go through your story pretty quickly so that we understand what you're looking for, and then make the connection. I think we're very open to talking to all different types of people because you never know. One of the things my colleagues and I pride ourselves on is if the opportunity isn't right for us, perhaps we can refer you to somebody else that it may be right for.
George?
So I definitely agree with you on all these things, especially on the short and concise first email or call. I keep getting, all of us get a lot of opportunities, I guess, every week, and many times those emails tend to be very, very long, and I don't think that's the best approach. So my advice would be a shorter paragraph or 2 stating what the medical need is, who you are, and what the technology can do. would be a good way to start the conversation. And then just asking for 15 minutes, 20 minutes for a call, rather than explaining the whole deck into a 6-page email is something important to us. For us, we have a more specific way of sourcing our deals at Camden, and I think that not many people do that here. We have a very specific group of venture partners, what we call venture partners, which are all scientists that have been authorities in their fields and have also been thinking commercially. So we have people they're part of our GP, most of them are Johns Hopkins, but we've expanded out of that, who have been also starting companies while being in science. And we like to source most of our deals through them. If we don't source our deals through them, we have those people play a major role in vetting those opportunities. And that's an approach that some other people do as well, like the Colin Group on the West Coast. I don't know many of them doing it on the East Coast. But for us, we thought it was a good way to partner with scientists. So we would use people like Bert Vogelstein on the cancer side at Johns Hopkins, or Drew Berdahl on the immunology side, to people like Sangeeta Bhatia and Jeff Karp at MIT on some medical devices and diagnostic stuff. So we like to partner a lot with scientists. We ask for their legitimate review of the technology, and they will make a decision. Like Adrian said, we always like to refer people to if it's not a good fit for us. So we always like people reaching out to us the right way, and which is happening a lot. But another point I wanted to make was, we like to see a lot of deals, but also we like to see deals that we can do. And if you go on our website, we're very specific about the criteria that we're looking for. And I think it's good if you are prepared and you read about this. Just, it's just a page of what we like, so you can understand before by just going to the website if it's a good fit of us or not. So some people don't read that, and that's sometimes bad. Another last thing that I've noticed that many people do is many times founders and CEOs and companies will have a scientific advisory board, and they will put names there of people that they work with. We call those people, and my advice would be, make sure that these people really like the company, right? Because I'm sure you've called people, and I call them every time, and if they say, yeah, I like George, I've met him 3 times, he's kind of a good guy, I did it to be, I don't know what the company does, I did it because he first time. It happens once every 3 companies, so make sure that whoever you have on the deck is a big advocate of the company, knows the technology, and is actually someone that can vouch for you, because it can really be destructive for someone like us to call those people up and know nothing about it. So that's something I wanted to throw out there. Yeah.
Well said. Bill?
I'd like to share a few things that I've learned and seen from my AbbVie days, and also from what I've observed with some of our LSN clients that we've helped fundraise and provides other services. When an investor is looking at a new opportunity or a potential deal, it's absolutely critical to have a clear package. And you've heard some of this already, but it's very important. Strong management team, a clear, concise package, 15, 20 slides, not 40 or 50, not an enormous amount of science there, but you need to be able to distill even the most detailed. If the technology is challenging, you still need to be able to distill it down so it's clear what the objectives are, what it can accomplish, and also what the investor is putting up money for. There needs to be some hint, even at the early stage, not hint, really a clear summary of how much the technology has been validated. And in the case of therapeutics, animal models, established models, and activity of what you've done. All of this is very critical, particularly if it's your first approach to an investment group. You have one chance. They typically won't spend a lot of time evaluating what your opportunity is. So if you can't get the idea across quickly, convey some sense of validation, and generate some interest, then you're really going to be at a loss. And another important thing is not throwing a lot of scientific data, but providing some sense of what your strategy is, what the critical path is in moving your technology forward, moving your therapeutic candidate forward, what stage it's at, the milestones, the inflection points, and how you can achieve those, and tie that back to the investment that you're looking for. All of which, it happens fast. All of these teams here and these folks here are good at triaging opportunities, and they can do it. They and their support staff can do it very quickly. So you need to have things really lined up, teed up, and put your best foot forward.
Michael?
Yep, I can speak on behalf of Pfizer and tell you guys how we kind of approach new opportunities and hopefully get some value out of this. In terms of how to approach not just Pfizer, but probably other big pharma use a similar process. So first of all, we're always looking to collaborate first, right? A lot of times when we talk to young companies, or on the earlier side companies, they're in the middle of raising Series A, and they're interested in equity investment solely. But for us, the whole reason why we do equity investment is to position that company to collaborate with us in the future. So that's a bit of a change from the way our venture fund used to work at Pfizer. In the past, our venture fund sits under finance, and financial return was the primary driver for why we were doing this. Now it's a joint effort. It's a larger fund. You might have seen the press release last year. We get to spend $100 million a year over the next 6 years. And it's joint between R&D and finance. So it's not just financial return anymore. If we're going to make an equity investment, success looks like we do something with that company, as they move to the next milestone. So that's kind of where things stand in terms of why we do equity investments. Second is whatever the opportunity is, it has to be on strategy. And the strategy at Pfizer over the last 5 years within R&D has become really focused, right? And you could go to our website to do that, to find out, which areas we're interested in. At minimum, I would say know which therapeutic areas we're in, right? Pfizer's not interested in every therapeutic area. The best approach probably is to go a little bit, one step deeper and understand underneath that which disease areas is Pfizer interested in within that therapeutic area, or any company you're talking to for that matter. I mean, that's one of the easiest ways to kind of screen out an opportunity. Is it something that we do internally? If not, then how can we move forward? Then George mentioned the team. That's definitely a big thing for us, particularly if we don't have a relationship already. So how can we understand the credibility of the team that we're talking to at the time? And the way we do that is by looking at the scientific advisory board, and also looking at the publication track record, like what journals do you publish in? So, get the right team, make sure that you talk to them and they understand that they're kind of involved with your company. But that's a great way to really validate your company and your technologies, to align yourself with the experts in the field. And then lastly, market potential for a big pharma is a big thing. I mean, Pfizer's in rare disease. We see opportunities with companies that are working on really small, rare, ultra orphan type opportunities, which are interesting and exciting scientifically. But if we can't stand in front of our commercial colleagues and make a case to move forward with this, if whatever we're proposing to do works in the future, there isn't really going to be a path forward. So market potential is certainly an important thing. And I'm not saying that all science has to be focused towards blockbuster opportunities. I'm speaking from the Pfizer perspective. If you're talking to, just keeping with this ultra-orphan theme, if you're talking to a patient advocacy organization that's going to fund your research, I mean, they probably don't care so much about the commercial potential. They're there to kind of cure the disease because their family members, friends, etc., are affected by it. So kind of know your audience, and if it's a big pharma company, I think the market potential is certainly going to be a hurdle you have to jump over. Or an investor, it might be a higher hurdle.
So it's sort of summarized, because we're a little pressed for time and have about 6 more topics to go.
Oh, this is my one last piece.
All right.
Because it's important for us. And I think it's a place where young companies can stumble. So your modality, right, manufacturing, if it's not a small molecule or an antibody where there's a lot of experience, it can be really tricky to make once you have to scale that up. And to be honest, for years we had kind of overlooked this somewhat at Pfizer, and we find ourselves in a bad situation where, yeah, the project worked on a small scale, but now we have to make clinical supply for a phase 2 study, and it just doesn't work, right? So make sure that you have a good way to kind of sell that there's an easy way to make whatever the modality is that you're working on. There's a lot of cool new science out there, but you have to be able to make it at scale.
So I'm going to be very helpful, hopefully. In Mid-Atlantic BioAngels, our website is bioangels.net. And there's a tab that says Entrepreneur. And on that tab, you can download an application. Well, it's a pretty significant application in that all of the questions that are asked are the things you're going to have to know to approach investors appropriately. There's information on the site that essentially sets the guidelines for the criteria we're expecting. And several people said it, know your investor. Don't come to an investor with a valuation that's 3 times what their expectations are. They're the wrong investor for your business. Or maybe you set your valuation incorrectly, one or the other. But nonetheless, there's no match there. And then finally, understand not only who your investors are, but what their expectations are. I heard Adrian talk about actually forming companies, working as an extension of the management team. I heard strategic interest from a company that would tie into what they want to promote and what they want to sell, because they take a strategic perspective. Different angel groups want board seats, different angel groups will want, and most of the criteria are exposed on their websites. So if you go through the application for MABA, you're going to see there are a lot of things that we expect you to know. For example, the competitive environment. When you're developing a drug, we don't want to, in our due diligence, find out there are three-phase assets looking for the same target by going to clinicaltrial.gov and putting that target in. We would have expected you to have done that in advance. We want to know who your advisors are and how committed they are. So we too call them. We have a group of interns, most of them are postdocs, that will screen these things before they get to a steering committee. The 15-person steering committee, then, those that are available, will go through all the available opportunities and choose those who we think would be attractive to the group from an investment perspective. We've invested a minimum of about $250,000 and a maximum of $10 million in a single business. So you need to know the depth and breadth of your angel group. Can they support around? Can they syndicate around? We're very fortunate to have members, for example, that belong to multiple angel groups. So if there's something that we're exposed to that we like, we'll syndicate it with other groups that generally invest with us. For example, I happen to be a member of Keiretsu. I'm a member of Robin Hood Ventures. I'm a founder of Mid-Atlantic BioVentures, and a few others, to be frank with you. And as a direct result of that, we get to see some of the same companies over and over and over again. We're looking for new disruptive science. We're looking for something that will have market uptake, because major companies with significant marketing budgets aren't promoting the same area of interest with the same target, for example. It's likely to fail. Those are the things that we ultimately consider. And frankly, having said that it may fail, it may be very attractive to a company that's looking into that space that doesn't have a drug in that space yet. So the bottom line is, know your competition, and most importantly, We want to know how you're going to exit. How will I get a return on investment? How does $1 turn into $10? How does that happen? And who are the folks out there that you might collaborate and partner with? And who ultimately might buy you? Are you looking to do an IPO? Do you want to build a sustainable business and run it forever? We're not interested. All right? We're interested in return on investment primarily. Then the level of involvement changes from one group to the next. For example, Adrian will be involved with the business. We may be passive. For my personal investments, I'm involved in almost all of them to some extent, at least for the first 2 years, because I want to make sure that decisions are being made appropriately, and that might be a board position, it might be an operating position, or a strategic advisory position, but nonetheless, I want to see what's happening. It's important to me. So those are all things that are very strong considerations. Let me just open it to the group in general, whoever would like to answer the question. What do you see the funding landscape looking like now? What do you see happening to valuations? And what's your anticipation of the future based on what you're seeing today? I know it's 3 questions. Anybody want to answer?
I can start. The funding landscape has actually changed quite a bit. People are getting, I mean, this is a great time for biotech. There are multiple places you can go for money, and the traditional venture capital investors are only one place. I don't think I recall in my career so many different types of people that are investing, and I'm always surprised when I read the daily updates that there are new investors jumping in that I've never that I didn't know, or there's a lot of different opportunities. Up until about, I would say 2 months ago, the valuations were high, but it looks like they're coming down, and I would assume they probably will continue to come down. They seem to be extraordinarily high over the last year or so, but as with various turns in our industry, usually that resets itself. But it's competitive, and so I think some of the things that my colleagues and I have shared seem intuitive, but you would be surprised how we get information. I think as George commented, we get hundreds of proposals. I would say maybe 25% of them are prepared in the way that we've discussed. So these very simple things really can go a long way just to getting your opportunity considered. And the one thing that I would also echo, which was a comment that Mike made, really know your audience. We find, and particularly at conferences like this, people just go down the list and try and register for meetings as long as you have this red tag. And one of the things I said at the outset, we are a company former. So if you're a CEO and your goal is to stay CEO, we may not be the company that you want to come to for investing. We, license technology and spin them out into subsidiary companies. So different from what Bill and Michael described, we're happy to put a strong management team around it. So what are the kinds of opportunities which are great for Fortress? Academic spin-outs, where you have scientific founders that don't want to run a company full-time, but still want to have scientific oversight, sit on a board, be the chair of a scientific advisory board. Early stage companies that they may have virtual employees, but are happy to add or supplement their management team with expertise from Fortress. So again, the first meeting we had this morning, we introduced the business model, and the entrepreneur said, well, I'm just looking for an investor. We're just trying to raise Series A. Then you probably shouldn't have gotten, set up a meeting with us. So again, just know your audience.
I'll be a little more provocative. I'll say it's kind of the Wild West out there today. I've never seen anything like this. there's just so much money flying around from so many different places. And I spend a lot of time also in Asia, where I think it's even crazier than it is here. And to tell you, or to exemplify even a little bit more, right? So I spend a lot of time in the oncology space also. At Pfizer, we have a hard time when we do our modeling in terms of like, there's a hurdle you have to clear in terms of is this going to work for us financially. We can't even make it work for oncology with like what the upfront payments are compared to other disease areas in terms of what we need to see in terms of IRR and ENPV. So that's why I say it's the Wild West. I mean, we're seeing deals for like 100 million upfront for there's not even a candidate molecule. It's madness. I'm not sure how sustainable this is. And I'd say that's why Pfizer probably hasn't done as many big splash deals as you see from some of our competitors over the last few years. Because if you really want something, you have to overpay today. That's just the reality of what it is. But one last quick point on it. I just want people to understand the dangers of this kind of environment. One is with so many options for money, not just like the well-known big VCs, but lots of family offices and just other investors, I'll just call them, popping up. You want to, if you're forming a relationship with an investor early on, like especially Series A, you want to make sure that they're going to be there for the long haul, right? Like they may be offering you a couple of million today, and it's hard to turn that down. But what if they just decide they no longer want to be with you after the Series A is over? You really want someone that's committed to go the whole distance with you. So that's one, and that's why reputable investors, I think, you should do your homework as an entrepreneur also. And then also just, this is more coming from my experience in Asia, but reputation is a big thing also. Like it can be tricky where some of this money is coming from in terms of how clean it is. So, if it's not a kind of reputable investor, you kind of also want to do your homework, and you don't want to wind up on the front page of the newspaper one day for taking some funny money. So.
Let me jump in too with, yes, funds are available. In some way, yes, Wild West out there. But we're focused on the early stage, and investors are really savvy. And if you're an early stage company, you'll see all these VCs, money available, funds available, but you could be too early. An important part of what you need to do in successfully getting funding is bringing your program forward to a point of validation that mitigates the risk. Everybody's looking to mitigate the risk. There's a lot of interest across all therapeutic areas, but you need to build that into your presentation. Well, you need to have that data. You need to have validation of the program. And I think that's a key element for success in the wild, wild west.
Good. I'm going to, again, George, if you have something to add, we'll come back to it, but let me just share a perspective. I went to a J.P. Morgan cocktail party last Wednesday night following Life Science Future in Philadelphia. And one of the prime topics was valuation. I know it's a very sensitive topic to entrepreneurs because you don't want to give away your company, but on the other side of things, there is nothing, valuations are sliding quickly now, and when there's an economic adjustment, and there's one coming, they'll slide even further. Not that, we're that nearsighted, we're just taking advantage of the situation for all intents and purposes as investors, because we know the cycles are 7 to 9 years, and we know that by the time you have to exit, the economic situation may be very different. But just kind of think about it this way. There's nothing more devastating to a company, at least I feel that's the case, than a down round, an adjusted round. If you set your sights at an astronomical figure, or a figure that's on top of the market, and then there's a market adjustment, and you have to bring in additional capital as a result of that, it's devastating to your initial investors. They saw all this value, they invested based on that, and then all of a sudden, the adjustment comes. And so my advice is to build slowly, to raise money at reasonable figures, take it from investors that are in the game and will stay with you and make multiple investments and continue to support the company. And then finally, when you've got something that represents a significant auctionable milestone that would thereby increase value, you can start looking at public multiples and things like that, because we discount dramatically from public multiples, because with these young companies, all the risk is in front of us. So it's a risk-reward balance. George?
I agree with what you guys said. I wanted to just add on your comments a little bit at the beginning. When we get also approached by different people, this won't work all the time, but sometimes it's good to do some research on the connections, meaning it's always better to have an investor or a scientist or someone that is involved with our group, that someone involved with your group knows, to make the initial contact or the initial email. Just a little bit of your comments about we get called many times a week, emailed even more. It's great if you do your research and if you go on our website, we have all of our venture partners, all of our scientific team, and then talk to your team and your investors and see if there's any connectivity. That's a much better way to at least attract our attention. I'm sure you guys agree with that too. That's very important because that's the first thing, and it can really jumpstart the whole process.
Yeah, I've been fundraising for a year, and everything you said is right on target. The email equivalent of a cold call, just sending packages out. 9 times out of 10, you don't even get a no, you don't get a response. So having a connection, networking, going to conferences like this, or through your personal network, being able to connect, that provides much more success.
Yeah. I think it's very important because it's also the personal factor. I mean, if you go online and you don't even know anything about me, it'll be hard to approach me the right way. But if you go to my bio, for example, you see that I went to Johns Hopkins, and you tell me, hey, I also went to JHU, or 3 of our people in our team are Hopkins alums, you're definitely going to get a response from me because I'm going to get excited about that. Or if you see what my partners do and find a similar way to reach out to them. So I think the personal connection or the 2 degrees of separation connection is very powerful here.
So we have time for questions from the audience now, and I'd like to field those. Questions? Yes, sir.
I'll just start. Steve Morales from Side of Strata. For the network comment, does that apply to corporate VC as well? I mean, if you have an R&D scientist who's like, hey, this does look good, talk to these guys.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. We encourage all our scientists to source opportunities. Also, if you happen to play golf with our CEO, that's a good way. But I'll tell you, internally, we're kind of forced to look at some of those opportunities and take them more seriously just because of that. So if you do happen to play golf with them, don't take it as we're in advisor.
The same applies at AbbVie. My experience back then, certainly the scientific team is actually engaged in evaluating the opportunities. So if you have something that comes in through them, that's actually a very good thing.
Yeah, when we make a bet, it's 70%, you've got to pass the science gate. It's got to be intriguing enough for us to want to dig deeper. But then it's all about, do we really think that this CEO has got what it takes? Can he build a relationship with him? Does he care about what I'm saying? Does he listen? Does he seem somewhat malleable, or is he absolutely insisting that everything he says is right? I mean, there are just a lot of ways to approach someone for an investment, and if you are always right and never in doubt, that's the wrong way.
Yeah. One other interesting comment, because I mentioned earlier, my role is 50% on our venture capital team, 50% oncology scouting. On the venture side, it's almost much easier, at least at Pfizer, to make an investment because while we do need to be aligned to the scientific strategy, it's ultimately the venture team's call. There's 10 of us on the team, right? Whereas if it's something that's going to go to one of our research units, like an in-license, then ultimately you need a scientific champion. You need a scientist to say, I want to do this. And they're also, keep in mind, they're gonna be weighing your project against something that they handpicked themselves, right? And so there's just so many people that can come out of the woodwork and say, no, I don't want to do that for reason X, Y, Z, and the not invented here syndrome is definitely very real, so.
Yes, sir.
Talk about structure a little bit when you are faced with a proposition that is going to take more than 50% of your company, so the founders are basically going to put themselves potentially in a position of being fired if they're in disagreement with the investors.
Well,
So I can comment a little bit about that because that's predominantly how we structure deals. Our intent is not to fire the founders, particularly with early stage investments. If you separate them from their creators, you're destined to fail. But a lot of times the creators that are out there trying to move the company don't have all of the experience they need. And perhaps they don't want to play a full-time role. So what we try to do is we can use the existing company, we can structure a new company, and ultimately, in addition to traditional licensing, economics, upfronts, milestones, royalties, we also include equity in the new company. And so that the scientific founders feel like they're still part of the company. It's not a majority equity, but it is generous. And we're also very creative to understand what kind of a role do you want to play going forward. Do you want to be full-time? Do you want to consult? Do you want to be part of the scientific advisory board or lead the scientific advisory board? So every entrepreneur or scientific founder comes with a different set of needs. Our model is to form companies, and we like to make the majority of the decisions, which is not for everybody, but for some scientific founders, it actually provides them not only with the capital, but the experience that they don't have and that they need going forward.
Yeah, that's the statement that we do just the opposite. We're looking for entrepreneurs that we think have either hit milestones or can hit milestones. And if we feel comfortable with that entrepreneur, we'll back them. And we'll provide additional structure if they want it, but that's not our game. We're essentially passive investors. We would like very much, if we see a first-time entrepreneur, to see that they understand, they know what they don't know, and they've surrounded themselves with a group of people that are dedicated to working in the business that do know. So I don't think there's anything wrong with a first-time entrepreneur. One time or another, I was one, and so have all of us been. I mean, we had to be successful or we couldn't be where we're at now, having done that. But along the way, there were a lot of failures. And I wish I knew then what I know now, because now I always surround myself with the smartest people I can find. You know, I'm the dumbest guy in the room most of the time.
A lot of people say that.
I have a question back here. What do you do for the initial seed funding on great ideas, support by the health research community? But you need money to do it. So a lot of the things that you go to is, well, who's funded you now? Well, no one yet. I have things in the fire. I have a lot of endorsements, but no one yet. So what do you do? It's kind of like being stuck in a rock in a hard place.
Have you done anything with the idea, or is it still?
Oh, there's plenty of supporting data, but we want a new indication.
How about any NIH grants or?
Yeah, that's been done, we're waiting to hear. I'm saying you gotta push your foot on the gas. It's gonna take 9 months to get that funding. You gotta maintain your IP every year. It costs 25 grand at a minimum to do that. So you can't let up, and you can't take, and in the best case scenario, especially for a new indication, they say you don't need preliminary data. Trust me, be prepared to expect that. So you can have the best idea in the world, and you better be prepared to get that initial data. So my question to all of you is how do you get that initial seed funding to do this idea?
Let me tie back into the last thing I said. You know, to the extent that that's a need that you have,
Oh, definitely.
then you focus on convincing a person that you're your science and the opportunity is exciting enough that has those skill sets or those connections.
Got
I mean,
surgeons, of course.
that's literally the way to do it, because that person will talk to me the way I want to hear. Right? You can't sell something to me the way you want to sell it. You got to sell it the way I want to buy it. And that person, having been there and done that, will understand it. So more often than not, it's really, again, I'll go back to it, who you surround yourself with.
No, I'm aware of that too.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can tell you from, I mean, we would not be the type of funder that you would go to. But I think, as Bernie said, you can, and others, you know, non-dilutive funding is always a great opportunity. But also, there are a lot of organizations that focus on seed and angel investing. And I would, you know, really spend your time with those organizations, because we see a lot of great ideas, but they have to be a little bit further thought through for a company like ours. You're in a challenging area, and unfortunately,
Yes.
you're going to have to look under a lot of stones and talk to a lot of people. I think the point made here about networking, because everybody knows somebody, and that's really the best way to find out who the people are that you need to speak to.
Thank you. Very good.
Good. Yes, sir.
I have a question for Bill, particularly because you're going after Alzheimer's disease, and there's been so many failures in that space, from an entrepreneur's perspective and also from an investor's perspective. Like, how do you kind of keep interest and get interest in that space when everyone starts pointing fingers and saying, look, nothing's going to work?
Great, so the issue is well, it's not even a controversy, is the amyloid theory dead? I have a slide with, actually 2 slides with all the antibody failures. It's just like an endless list of negative.
Yeah.
When you talk to somebody about Alzheimer's, some have said, no, too risky for us, not interested. And that's why you have to know your investors and what they're interested in, what their mandate is. But when you talk to somebody who's open to a novel target, that's clearly a novel target, you need some validation, as much validation as you can with animal models and so on. We have some of that. We don't have enough of that yet, and we're working on it. One reaction or one answer I've gotten many times is, well, this is a little too early. We want to see a candidate. It's a small molecule program. We have more chemistry to do, more testing and CROs to do. But there is an appetite for novelty. That's clear. Absolutely clear. But
To be able to help a little bit in that regard, I've got 2 very good friends that are in an Alzheimer's company, and I have refused to invest in that company, only because of the track record of Alzheimer's drugs, for no other reason. But interestingly, I called my friend and said, did you look at this company that had lackluster phase 2 results, but it got 110 million in funding on a public platform? The company's called Neurotrip, and they're looking for assets. Hey, I bet you they'd make a bet on your asset, right? As a collaboration, they certainly have some cash, and that might be a way to approach it, and that seems to be going forward now. So there's always a way to find appropriate funding if you take a creative approach to it.
To add to that, we're looking right now at an Alzheimer's company talking about funding and alternative ways of funding. They're going a phase 3 trial, all non-dilutive. So that's the company's called Aging Bio. It's a Hopkins spin out, and we're looking at them right now. And I was really impressed to see, although we all know the negativity around Alzheimer's success rate. For me, and to your last point, I'm always very impressed to see somebody going from 0 to phase 2, especially phase 3 in this case, all with over 100 million in this case in non-dilutive capital. I think that's just phenomenal.
you know, and.
So that attracted our
And
attention.
again, ways of looking for money, not-for-profits, state agencies want to build jobs, foundations. Those are the places to look first. to
And the
get your
foundation,
money going.
you know, the Alzheimer's.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're doing
Alzheimer's
it.
Foundation, Cystic Fibrosis Foundation has been phenomenal with Vertex, of course, but also just playing the VC game as a non-for-profit, talking about the rare diseases that we talked earlier, Foundation for the Blindness, we've seen in the ophthalmology space.
That is a huge even for seed funding, and the
Yeah,
benefit is
you're
not
right.
only, the benefit is not only do you get money, but they have experts. They have KOLs and other experts there that you can have help you and advise you in terms of what you need to do and what's, happening in the competitive landscape. So.
It adds a lot of credibility to your company as well, if you can get that kind of funding.
Absolutely.
And validation from those experts. It's a huge deal.
Thank you all for coming. I think we're wrapping up our session right now, and you can hang around for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bernie.
Thank you.